This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with an attempt to take the country's political temperature. Tomorrow is Election Day. Only a few national races to speak of, but still all sorts of opportunity to measure how the electorate is feeling about a number of issues and the quality of government in general. Based on the polls, the country is convinced the economy is in trouble, the White House isn't listening, and Congress is inept. Our first report is from the state of Washington, where the whole issue of how long politicians should be allowed to stay in office has become a major one. Here's ABC's Ken Kashiwahara.
Limit the terms of politicians?
Voters in Washington state are being asked not only to limit the terms of future elected officials, but of their incumbents as well.
There's only 3 reasons these incumbents leave office. It's death, retirement, or indictment.
If the measure passes, Washington state's entire congressional delegation, including House Speaker Tom Foley, would be out of office in 3 years, replaced by rookie representatives in a system that traditionally has favored experience.
And that would be a really serious consequence. We're a small state with a small delegation. And without some kind of seniority, we really don't stand a chance.
We hope that you choose to vote yes on Initiative 553.
The term limit movement here is riding a wave of voter disenchantment that cuts across the political spectrum. Polls show the measure has strong support. And while the campaign is financed mostly by out-of-state conservative Republicans, Sherry Bockwinkel, the movement's leader, describes herself as a liberal Democrat. Career politicians, she argues during debates, become more concerned about perks, pensions, and pay raises than the public interest.
And look at what all the seniority and experience has given us. The SNL scandal. More expensive government. The taxpayers are paying it, and what do we have? Elected officials that are becoming millionaires at our expense.
Opponents say voters already have a way to limit terms. It's called the ballot. Setting limits by law, they say, takes away a fundamental right.
I simply am concerned about an undemocratic initiative that would deny me the right to return to office men and women who I think are doing a fine job.
The term limitation ballot measure here in Washington state may be the most drastic in the country, but it is only the latest in the grassroots movement that is spreading like a wildfire across America's political landscape. 3 states have already passed term limitations, and at least 17 others are circulating petitions to limit the terms of their politicians.
The term limits movement in the United States is enormously broad right now, and it's a combination of anti-tax groups, minority parties, and populists left and right.
The battle will not end at the ballot box. If the term limit measure passes, the courts will have to decide whether state voters can limit the terms of federal officials. But supporters say if it takes an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to get rid of overstaying politicians, they'll try that too. Ken Kashiwahara, ABC News, Seattle.
In Pennsylvania tomorrow, President Bush's own prestige appears to be very much on the line. Voters will choose a new senator because the Republican incumbent John Hines was killed in a plane crash last April. The Republican who would like to replace him is very much running on President Bush's record. He is, after all, Mr. Bush's former Attorney General, who has seen a 40-point lead in the polls evaporate. Here's ABC's Jim Wooten.
Richard Thornburg, fairly famous Republican and accomplished name-dropper.
I do know George Bush, and he's a good man.
See, I told you,
yes,
Chloe.
Indeed.
And Harris Wofford, not so famous Democrat, with another name worth dropping.
And John Kennedy said, we can do better.
Wofford, who worked for Kennedy 30 years ago, has done better. Better than anyone expected by blaming Pennsylvania's recession on Bush and draping him around Thornburg's neck. Thornburg rejects any suggestion that the campaign has become a referendum on the president, and he cites a Democrat as his authority.
I tend to agree with Tip O'Neill's characterization, all politics is local.
Both men are running against Washington.
Well, we're going to send a message.
Yeah.
But Wofford has made national health insurance the predominant issue in this state, where about 1/3 of the families are not covered by any policy. Thornburg's response?
He is a classic tax and spend liberal Democrat.
Neither candidate is overly charismatic, though their several $1 million worth of television ads, including more than $1 million apiece over the weekend, have spiced up their campaign with attacks on each other's character and credibility and their advertising.
The Philadelphia Daily News. Thornburg is lying about Harris Wofford.
Wofford was in Philadelphia today trying to rally enough of his troops to overcome expected Republican margins elsewhere.
Your first Democratic senator in 23 years reporting for duty.
And Thornburg was in an area hospital trying to demonstrate his concern for health care. Most polls show the race dead even. Even before the votes are cast or counted, a couple of judgments are fairly clear. First, an obscure Democrat has built a surprisingly strong campaign on domestic issues, including the economy. Second, a famous Republican has discovered that, for the moment at least, George Bush is not a particularly useful name to drop. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Reading, Pennsylvania.